StudyIQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।
नमस्कार दोस्तों, वेलकम टू StudyIQ IAS। माय नेम इज चांद कुबा। दोस्तों, जैसे कि हम सब जानते हैं कि डिटेल्ड एप्लीकेशन फॉर्म 2 भरने का समय आ चुका है। आज के अपने इस सेशन में हम जानेंगे हमारे गेस्ट से कि किस तरह से डिटेल्ड एप्लीकेशन फॉर्म 2 को भरा जाए, क्या क्या चीज़ों का ध्यान रखा जाए और क्या हमारी अप्रोच होनी चाहिए। इस मुद्दे पर बात करने के लिए आज हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं पूर्व IAS श्री अनिल स्वरूप सर। सो वेलकम सर, वेलकम टू द शो। एंड सर, मैं सबसे पहले आपसे ये जानना चाहूँगा कि जब हम डिटेल्ड एप्लीकेशन फॉर्म की बात करते हैं, इसकी महत्वता क्या है, क्या इसका इम्पोर्टेंस रहता है?
देखिए, मेरे विचार से डैफ का जो महत्वपूर्ण उपयोग है वो बोर्ड के लिए होता है। बोर्ड को वो जानकारी मिल जाती है जिसके आधार पर वो आपसे प्रश्न कर सकें। Hence one has to be very careful about what you write in DAF. Normally people have this impression that if they write great things in DAF, they will get more marks. My understanding is very clear. DAF does not give you many marks. DAF provides an instrument at the hands of the board members for them to ask questions. So whatever details that you fill in the form there, you have to be extremely careful because there is a likelihood of you being asked questions on what you filled in there. So the first part, of course, is a factual one. You can't change much about it. Where you've studied, where you've lived, all your university details, college details, they are factual in nature, so you can't do much about it. But in the second part, there's a lot of subjective element in it with regard to what trophies you won, what awards you've got, which is the service that you would want, what is the cadre that you would like. So these are all subjective questions based on some information that you have at your command, on the basis of which you answer those questions there. And hence, the board is likely to ask questions to you about why did you choose what you chose and why did you wrote what you wrote. So one has to not only be careful about what you are writing, but while preparing for the personality test, one has to go back to that DAF and see what are the likely questions that are going to emerge out of what you've written there.
Okay. So sir, as you said that we have to fill all such kind of details such as prizes also. So when we talk about prizes only, let's say we have to write about the prizes and medals. सर, इसमें कौन से prizes and medals, एक अगर हम देखें कि कौन से prizes and medals के बारे में लिखा जाए, क्योंकि कई बार हम देखते हैं कि जो स्टूडेंट है स्कूल टाइम में अच्छा नहीं इस एक्टिविटीज़ में इनमें परफॉर्म करता है, कॉलेज टाइम में भी नहीं करता है, अगर हो ही नहीं prizes या medals, तो इस सिचुएशन में क्या किया जाए?
So first of all, you should not be very hassled if you haven't won anything in the past. It is not necessary for you to be winning all the awards to get into the civil service. But if you indeed have, then you can mention them there. But be careful about what you mention, because when you write something there of an award, you should be in a position to explain the details of the competition that you had, as also the award that was given to you. So I would usually suggest that if you say won an award, say in a class competition, try and avoid it. I mean, it should be of a certain level, in the sense, at least at the college level, you should have won something. It need not be an weekly debate or weekly conversation or weekly activity where you end up coming first or something like that. By and large, avoid. Second, I think you should underplay it a bit rather than overplaying it. Err on the side of underplaying your awards rather than overplaying. As I mentioned earlier, your winning of awards in the past are not going to give you more marks. So some people think that if they write everything that they have won from here, there, everywhere, and they will end up getting more marks in the civil service personality test. My understanding is that may not matter. That will not happen. Your marks will be determined by what you say during the course of the personality test, not what you've done in the past. What you've done in the past, as I said, is an instrument at the hands of the members of the board to ask you questions. So if you've represented your college in a particular activity, a sport, do mention it. But then you should know the background of how the selection was done, what was the nature of the activity involved, what did you do thereafter, how did it impact you. All that you have to keep in mind when you write your DAF.
So sir, there is another option where we have to write about the sports. Now it is seen many a times that we don't actually are interested in sports, and still many people write about that they fill that column. So is it appropriate to do so?
So sports could appear in two parts. It could appear where you've done something. For example, if you've represented a college or a region or a state, then you can mention that. But many people represent a particular sport as a hobby. Now there is a difference. If you've played a sport at a particular level, then you are expected to have greater knowledge of that sport. But if you mentioned sport as a hobby, so for example, many people, if I were to write my hobby today, I would write watching cricket matches. So that's my hobby. But in that case, when you're writing purely as a hobby, then you don't have to have an in-depth knowledge of that particular area for that particular sport. But mind you, if you represented your college in cricket at a particular level, then you should jolly well know the difference between a googly and a Chinaman. If they could ask you this question. So, representing at a particular level, it is expected of you to have knowledge of that particular area. Whereas in a hobby, you need not have that greater knowledge, but you should be generally aware of what is happening in that. So, for example, if you mention cricket as your hobby, and you're not aware that India is likely to go to Bangladesh to play a test match, then you are in trouble, because that's awareness level. But what would be the cricketers there? What are their specialties? Who's good at left arm spin and left arm pace? That you need not know as a hobby, but if you played at a particular level, then you jolly well know. So we must understand this difference very clearly. Hobby is something which you do during your spare time. So you are consuming your spare time in a pleasurable way. Whereas if you're playing a game at a particular level, then you develop a particular type of expertise, and hence the knowledge level has to be much more than a person who just has it as a hobby. You can have a greater knowledge as a hobby also, but I don't think you should be too much concerned if you don't have too many details about a particular sector that you write as a hobby. But if you have achieved something in a particular segment, then you better know about it. So if you write about dramatics, then you know about drama. If you participated in drama, if it's not merely a hobby, it's slightly more than a hobby part, then you should know about dramatics more than like a hobby.
Sir, and then there is another column which talks about your leadership position in school and college. Now, sometimes it becomes a question of doubt, and where we see that the students are not actually into these kind of activities. So what should be is it a point of concern for the student?
See, first of all, don't be concerned about what you have not done. That has to be very clear in your mind. You should not feel diffident. You should not feel. You should not be underconfident about anything. But if you have done something, if you occupied those leadership positions, you mentioned. If you haven't, don't be nervous about it. There are many people who haven't occupied these positions and have done very well in the personality test. Now, there is a reason why this, to my understanding, there is in the DAF. Because at least in the IAS and the police service, large number of officers who join the service, in fact, almost everyone, has to occupy a leadership position. So this is probably one of the most important component of your DAF. This part of the DAF may stand you in good stead while they're interviewing you or where they're asking questions, because the board is also looking at potential leaders. So if you occupied those positions, leadership positions, then mention them. But don't mention them if you haven't. See, this has to be very clear. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to write what you've done. These leadership positions could be here. You can write if you were a captain, college captain, or a house captain, mention them. If you are head of a literary society, mention them. Because that conveys that this person who's being interviewed at that point in time has certain leadership qualities. He's held those positions, and that will probably help you. But even at the cost of repetition, let me say, don't write for the sake of writing, because then you could be in trouble.
So we have to write honestly. I mean, that
absolutely,
should be reflected.
Absolutely. If you write something which you are yourself have either not done or not convinced about, then you could be in very serious trouble. Don't write that. As I said, are on the side of playing it low rather than playing it high.
And sir, when we talk about cadre, we have to fill our cadre preference in DAF too. There are some, doubts about it also. I mean, which state should be taken, and then there are some, things which are going around that this state is good, this state is not good. Let's talk about Haryana. So there are perceptions that Haryana is a very good state. It is close to power center. Then Rajasthan is a very good state if you want respect and all. So should it really be a consideration while filling the DAF?
Selecting a particular cadre is a very personal choice. I would believe each individual has his own preferences. By and large, people prefer to be in their home state, which is understandable. You've lived there for your life. You've studied there. You want to serve that same state, which is very natural. If you are not giving your home state as your state, then you should have good answer to explain why didn't you opt for the home state. That's an answer question that could be asked of an individual, because it is usually expected that a person who belongs to a particular state would give that state as his preferred choice. Coming to the understanding of states, now it again depends on a personal choice. It is, as you say, since states like Rajasthan, Haryana and UP and to a certain extent Bihar are feudal in nature, it is perceived that the civil servants get more respect here than other states. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but that's a perception. And if people do want that sort of a perception to be correct, then they can opt for it. Again, as I said, it's a personal choice. I've seen officers doing extremely well all over the country in other cadres. I have seen officers feeling absolutely miserable. I come from UP. I've seen officers suffering in the state of UP, yet some other officers have enjoyed. So to me, it's purely subjective. It's your choice, your understanding. My suggestion to those that are pulling DAF, again, be honest about it. Honest in the sense that clarity of thought in your mind as to what you want. Almost every state offers opportunities to serve the people. If that is your objective, then one state is as good as the other. But if you're looking at what is understood as power, then be careful because, pursuing power can be troublesome also. So I would suggest don't go by what is perceived as powerful and power states, as you mentioned. And not to say that Haryana and Rajasthan are indeed very good cadre, as is UP. I've served in UP for more than a decade, and I find that state to be very good. Yet there are problems. So I've yet to come across a state, because as in the center I used to travel to all the states and interact with the state government officials, where everything is hunky-dory. There are problems of every state. Then there are, of course, positives of every state. So as I said, this is purely a personal choice. But when you make a choice, you should have a reason to explain why you made that choice. At least the initial choice that you make. Thereafter, of course, explanations may not be sought. But if your first, second, third states that you've selected, you don't have good reasons to explain, then you could be in trouble. You have to explain what you had expected when you opted for it. That's why if you go in for your home state, since it is considered to be usual, you will not be asked a question. Questions are normally asked where it is unusual, when it's not expected of an individual, and he opts for that particular state. So a person straight from UP opts for, say, Karnataka, obviously he'll be asked this question: why have you jumped over from your home state from UP to Karnataka? Or vice versa. Why have you opted for that state? The answer, there has to be a good answer to that. But that's, once you don't opt for a state where you belong, the chances are that you will certainly be asked that question: why haven't you gone for your home state? Have a good answer for that.
Okay, so but when we talk about All India services, we also study that All India services, one of the purpose of All India services is that we should, create unity in India and we should experience different cultures. So when we talk about when we opt our own home state as a cadre preference, doesn't it raise eyebrows? Because generally the conception is that when we go into these kind of services, we should go out of our state so that we can have, understanding of the other states and serve other states better. Since it is also seen in the case of High Court judges also.
50% of the persons serving the state are outsiders in All India services. So you have a combination of people who understand the state, who are in the state, and 50% from outside. So I think that's a very good combination. It brings in that balance. Imagine a scenario where everyone is, as I call them, a Japani, he goes to other states and works. The experience that he would have gained as a youngster, seen the problems of the state, as a recipient, because then he was not in the service, on the other side, also benefits him. Because they also would have suffered as a consequence of actions and inactions of bureaucracies. And then when they join the service, the chances of them understanding those problems would be slightly better. And hence, I think I agree with the present balance that exists between 50 and 50. When you talk of judges, not even 5% of the judges go to others. That is true. They are in their own states.
That is true. So what we are saying is that it is completely safe and, preferable to go for the home state.
On the contrary, I would say that if you don't opt for a home state, you must have a good answer to explain why you didn't. Okay. You can't go and say, sir, I wanted to serve the country and I wanted to see some other states. I don't think that will gel. Okay. Have some good reason for not opting for your home state.
So when we come to, one particular question comes to my mind, since it is asked, as a first question only, that why you want to join IAS or why you want to join the civil services. Now, such kind of questions, we get, very idealistic answers. How should we tackle such kind of questions?
My take is slightly different on that. There's no harm in being an idealist, but you have to be practical. You have to be practical. There's no harm in saying that I have to join the service because that gives me an opportunity to do things that I want to do. Because as compared to other services, in my limited understanding what the service is, because they wouldn't have served in the service, is that the opportunities are huge. and such opportunities that give you also a sense of satisfaction. So there is a selfish motive of deriving a sense of satisfaction, yet that sense of satisfaction is derived from the service of the people. So which service gives you that opportunity to serve such huge number of people and benefit from it in the sense of satisfaction that you derive? So it's practical way of looking at it. If that kick that you get out of serving the poorest of the poor or the people of the state or the country, then it's worth it. You are being selfish here. You are being practical here. But your selfishness is served by serving others. So that's there. Second, sir, the prestige associated with this cannot be brushed aside. Yes, there is prestige associated with it, but that's not my primary consideration for joining the service. It is a consideration, but not the consideration for joining the service. The consideration is basically for getting that opportunity to do things on the ground, to make things happen, because not every vocation in the country gives you that. Yes, every vocation gives you an opportunity to do in a particular sphere, in a particular limited way. But in the All India services, I think the domain is much larger, where you can influence the minds and action of people around. And that is the objective of joining the service.
So next question is that when we talk about the language in interview, since we are given an option to go, away from the language of our mains, so should it be like that we should take the same language as we took in mains, or should we go for the other language?
It is a choice with the candidate. In my time, that was not a choice available. Today, that choice is available, and they should exercise that choice. Because it depends on the articulation of an individual. Some people are good at writing in a particular language, but they are not very good at speaking in that particular language. So that call will have to be taken by the candidate based on his articulation, how well he or she is in communicating. So I have come across a number of aspirants who are very good at writing, say, in English, but when it comes to speaking, they find it difficult to speak the language, and so they are well advised to go in for a Hindi language at the interview. I don't think it will be held against them, because the provisions allow that, and since it is allowed, it will not be held. What has to be understood is that during the personality test, the board is trying to assess certain aspects of an individual, and the medium of communication is merely an instrument through which they try to understand the individual. So it's an assessment of the personality of an individual, in which communication is also a very important aspect. But more than communication, they go behind it to see what is the aptitude, the attitude, the approach, the logic that is being presented. All this is being assessed by the board. The language becomes a communication. Language becomes the vehicle through which they understand. So if a candidate can express himself or herself better in, say, Hindi or English, whichever the language, they should opt for that. They should not necessarily go in the language which they have written. Yes, they could be asked this question, that you have given your written exam in English and now you have come here in Hindi. You can easily say, sir, मैं अंग्रेजी में लिख तो सकता हूँ ठीक ठाक, लेकिन बोलने में मुझे थोड़ी तकलीफ होती है, इसलिए मैंने सोचा कि चूंकि मैं अपने विचारों की अभिव्यक्ति उतने अच्छी तरीके से अंग्रेजी में नहीं कर सकता हूं मौखिक रूप से, इसलिए मैं हिंदी में आपसे बात कर रहा हूं. It's good enough a reason. So but one must have an answer to that. There will certainly be a question to all those candidates who have opted for a different language than the one that they have picked up for written exam. They will certainly be asked this question, that why have you changed your language? And there can be a very simple answer, but you should be ready with that answer.
Honest answer will work, right? That is there.
Not only here, but honest answers work throughout. I have been advising everyone, be honest to yourself, be honest about the answers that you give, because then your views will be consistent. If you're truthful, you don't have to change your views, because you're truthfully saying, and truth is only one. You say that honestly.
You don't need to remember.
You don't remember anything.
Okay. Sir, जब हम सर्विसेज की बात करते हैं, we see that there are 24 सर्विसेज. अब इसमें मोस्ट ऑफ द जो कैंडिडेट्स रहते हैं सर, वो IAS के लिए प्रेफरेंस फिल करते हैं. जैसे कि आपने कहा कि किसी ने भी सर्व तो किया नहीं है, सब जाएंगे पहली बार ही सर्व करेंगे, तो इसमें क्या जो बाकी सर्विसेज हैं कहीं वो अंडर एस्टिमेट हो जाती हैं, या फिर बाकी सर्विसेज के बारे में हम उतना जानते नहीं हैं, सिर्फ IAS के लिए इसीलिए हम जाते हैं, या कोई और फैक्टर इसमें काम करता है जो इसके?
Since I have had the personal experience as an IAS officer for 37 years and for a year as police service officer, I haven't had experience in other services, but I've had the occasion to interact with officers of other services. Let me very frankly say, I think all these services that are listed out are very good, through which you can serve a lot of people. But if you have to compare, and they say comparisons are odious, but sometimes you do have to compare, merely the canvas that you have in the All India Service, the IAS, of interacting with people, of influencing their minds and actions, of making a difference to the poorest to the poor, I think IAS takes the cake. Because that is where, it is not to say that in other services you can't do that. There is enormous amount of scope in other services also to do a lot of good work. But if one has to compare, I think that is the service. And that is probably the reason why majority of the aspirants opt for IAS as the service. There is obviously a lot of prestige also attached to it. It would be wrong to deny that prestige that is associated with IAS. And I have discovered that if you do your job well, you are given even greater respect. So there is indeed a lot of respect for good work. Again, it is not to say that respect is not there for good work in other services, but sheer exposure that you get in the IAS gives you a greater sense of satisfaction that of what you do. Similarly, in the police service, of course, again, it would be wrong to deny that there is no prestige. Yes, indeed, there is a prestige attached to that service. But I think your true regard or true reverence comes through the good work that you do. Again, the ambit is much larger than other services. Say, for example, audit and account service. The beauty of that service is that it is perhaps one of the very few services totally insulated from political interference, because it comes directly under the Comptroller and Auditor General. That's the beauty of the service. On the other side, it is a desk job by and large. Yes, you do move out to audit, units, government units and all, and you do have other options also, but by and large, it is a job sitting on the chair. So each service has its positives and negatives. That is why it's purely subjective for a person to decide. Again, whatever they decide, they should be able to answer a question why they opted for that service. The usual preferences, normally questions may not be asked. So for example, if you give IFS or IAS as the first choice, either of them, maybe you'll ask a question, why did you opt for the foreign service, not the IAS, or vice versa IAS? They are virtually seen as equal services. Then normally, usually people give police service as the next assignment, and then so on and so forth. If you break this, so for example, some candidates have opted for revenue service as the first choice. You should have a good answer to explain why did you opt for revenue service. I may not have a perfect answer, but person should explore and find an answer to that, because usually, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'm saying that's the usual thing. I'm mentioning this because whatever you write in DAF, if it is usually accepted norm, then the questions will not be asked. Again, I would repeat and say, I'm not saying that is right or wrong. What is usually accepted as the norm. If you go beside that norm, if you write something different from the norm, then be prepared for a question.
सर, जैसे कि लास्ट इंटरव्यू में भी हमने बात की थी एंड आपने एक पॉइंट को बड़ा स्ट्रेस किया था, वो था सेल्फ अवेयरनेस. अगर एक व्यक्ति सेल्फ अवेयर है तो मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं उसे अपनी पर्सनैलिटी भी देखनी चाहिए. अगर वो इंट्रोवर्ट है तो IAS क्या एक अच्छी चॉइस रहेगी, या कहीं पे अगर कोई व्यक्ति इंट्रोवर्ट है, क्या ऐसे लोगों को ज़्यादातर जो है डेस्क जॉब के लिए या फिर IRS जैसे सर्विसेज के लिए जाना चाहिए?
देखिए, मैंने बहुत सारे इंट्रोवर्ट लोगों को देखा है जो सर्विस में रहकर एक्सट्रोवर्ट बन गए. तो ये कहना बड़ा गलत होगा कि कोई व्यक्ति इंट्रोवर्ट है इसलिए उसको यहाँ नहीं आना चाहिए, एक्सट्रोवर्ट है यहाँ. बहुत निर्भर करता है इस बात पर कि किन सर्कमस्टांसेस में वो ग्रो किया है. कई बार क्या होता है कि वो जो इनिशियल सर्कमस्टांसेस हैं उसके जीवन की ऐसी रही हैं कि वो इंट्रोवर्ट बन गया. फिर जब वो सेवा में आया, मैंने IAS में देखा, वो आके जैसे जैसे खिला वो खूब एक्सट्रोवर्ट बन गया. तो ये किसी को ब्रांड करना इंट्रोवर्ट एक्सट्रोवर्ट मेरे विचार से ठीक नहीं है. इसके लिए और पर्सनालिटी ट्रेट्स को देखना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि बहुत इंट्रोवर्ट होते हैं, बाद में उनको लीडरशिप पोजीशंस जब मिलती हैं तो लीडरशिप अच्छे बन जाते हैं. तो ये ब्रांड करना कि इंट्रोवर्ट के लिए IAS अच्छी नहीं होगी या पुलिस अच्छी नहीं होगी या कोई और सर्विस अच्छी होगी, मेरे विचार से ठीक नहीं है. कई व्यक्तियों को देखना पड़ेगा कि उनकी एनालिटिकल कैपेबिलिटीज क्या है, उनका एक्सप्रेशन क्या है, उनका एटीट्यूड क्या है. आई वुड पर्सनली, इफ आई वर टू इंटरव्यू समबडी, आई लुक फॉर द एटीट्यूड ऑफ द पर्सन in terms of how positive he is. He may be an extrovert, but if he is negative in an attitude, then he can be a disaster as a civil servant. So I have seen extroverts who are negative in their dispensation in the IAS and proved disastrous. I have trained introverts who were positive in a dispensation, and mind you, there is no necessity of an introvert to be negative. Normally one would assume that, but it's a strong assumption if it is. Extroverts can be negative, introverts can be positive. I would rather go for a positive introvert than a negative extrovert, because that introvert person can become an extrovert, or he will be forthcoming once he realizes the potential. As I said, the personality traits are developed over a period of time, right? Now, they don't get frozen. People evolve as they go along. So when they join the service, they also evolve. So I don't think I would be prejudiced against an introvert or against even an extrovert, because that's not what I'm looking at.
And sir, then there is another doubt about Group B services, that is DANICS and DANEPS. अब कई सारे जो प्रेफरेंस भरने वाले स्टूडेंट्स रहते हैं वो ये कहते हैं कि हमें फील्ड सर्विसेज पसंद हैं, हम IAS IPS या उसके बाद सीधा जो फील्ड में डैनिक्स या फिर डैनेप्स के लिए जाना पसंद करेंगे. क्या ये कम्प्लीटली प्योर पर्सनल चॉइस रहती है? क्या ये सही चॉइस उनके लिए मानी जाए?
मेरे विचार से अच्छी चॉइस है, कोई नुकसान नहीं अगर कोई फील्ड में वर्क करना चाहता है, क्योंकि 10-12 साल में ज़्यादातर जगह डैनिक्स के और डैनेप्स के ऑफिसर्स ऑल इंडिया सर्विस ज्वाइन कर लेते हैं. So they lose out about 8-10 years. They don't get that seniority. But if someone is keen on working in the field area, so if there is a comparison between, say, a desk job, which maybe give you slightly faster promotion, they should go in. Everyone, आपने एक प्रश्न किया था जिस पे हम चर्चा नहीं कर पाए कि अपने आप को पहचानना जरूरी है पहले. Either you change your personality, but if I am a field man, you know, some people are there in for the field, then go for field jobs. If you enjoy working on desk, then you take a desk job, because ultimately it is the sense of satisfaction that you derive that matters. You know, I'm going out of the way to mention this. I see many IAS officers feeling terrible in the service. The service doesn't make them any great. They have to understand themselves. But if you understand yourself well, then probably you'll be able to assess and opt for the right service. Sometimes it becomes necessary for that person to, you know, get in touch with his or her mentor and discuss at length their well-wishers and try and understand oneself as to what could be the best for me, and then opt for that service. Again, as I said, I cannot decide or you cannot decide what a person should opt for. But if he knows himself well and tries to understand the services around, he will be able to make the right choice.
Sir, कई बार हमें ये सुनने में आता है कि जो बोर्ड इंटरव्यू कंडक्ट कर रहा है, नाउ ये सब अवधारणाएं सर कितनी सच कितनी झूठ ये तो हम नहीं जानते, बट अगेन कई बार सुनने में आता है कि बोर्ड जो है कई बार यंग जो कैंडिडेट्स हैं उनके प्रति या उनकी तरफ बायस्ड नज़र आता है, क्योंकि यंग कैंडिडेट्स को ज़्यादा सिलेक्ट किया जा रहा है, या फिर अर्बन एंड रूरल में कहीं ना कहीं बायसनेस. क्या ये कहीं भी हमें एक चिंता का विषय हमारे लिए होनी चाहिए अवधारणा?
पहली बात तो मेरे विचार से बोर्ड इस पे चिंता नहीं करता होगा. मैं बोर्ड पे नहीं बैठा हूं तो मैं नहीं कह सकता करते हैं या नहीं करते हैं, लेकिन मान लीजिए फॉर द सेक ऑफ आर्गुमेंट वो करता भी है, तो आप क्या कर सकते हैं? आपकी जो उम्र है, आप अपने बाल में कुछ ज्यादा अच्छा, क्या आप कहते हैं उसे, डाई लगा के जाएंगे, आप यंग तो नहीं हो जाएंगे. आप कुछ कर नहीं सकते, जो हैं वो आप हैं. मेरा सुझाव ये रहता है, जितने एस्पिरेंट्स हैं उनको कहता है कि आप उनके लिए उन बिंदुओं की चिंता कीजिए जिनके बारे में आप कुछ कर सकते हैं. मान लीजिए आपका रूरल बैकग्राउंड है तो है, आपका अर्बन बैकग्राउंड है तो है, आपकी उम्र 30 साल है तो है, आप उसे कम तो कर नहीं सकते, आप अपने बैकग्राउंड को चेंज तो नहीं कर सकते, वो तो है. अब आप किन बिंदुओं पर कर सकते हैं उस पर चिंतित रहिए, उसका कारण है. क्योंकि आप उन विषयों पर चिंता करेंगे जिनका आप कुछ नहीं कर सकते, तो आपके पास पहली बात तो समय नहीं बचेगा उन विषयों पर चिंता करने के लिए जिसका आप कुछ कर सकते हैं. तो मेरा सुझाव ये रहता है, आप उनको छोड़ दीजिए, भूल जाइए. अगर बोर्ड कुछ करता है तो करे अपने घर पे. पहली बात तो मेरे विचार से नहीं करता होगा, लेकिन करता भी है, उम्र को उनको दायरा रखता है, तो आप अपनी उम्र कम नहीं कर सकते. आपकी जितनी उम्र है उसको ध्यान रखते हुए आप अपनी इंटरव्यू की तैयारी कीजिए. तैयारी पे बल कीजिए, उन बिंदुओं पर बल दीजिए जिनको आप परिवर्तित कर सकते हैं अपने पर्सनालिटी ट्रेट्स में और होन कर सकते हैं अपने पॉजिटिव पार्ट्स को, rather than thinking about issues over which you have no control. If you have no control over something, why unnecessarily worry about it? Spend time on issues over which you have control. That will help you, give you that confidence. Otherwise, you will be conscious of certain things over which you have no control. And that consciousness will leave you, as I said earlier, little time to work upon areas over which you have control and you can improve.
कई सारी केस स्टडीज़ या सिचुएशंस हमसे पूछी जाती हैं कि अगर आप इस सिचुएशन में हैं, एक ऑफिसर हैं, क्या करेंगे। ऐसे में अगेन वो केस स्टडीज़ हम एथिक्स के पेपर में भी करके आ चुके हैं। फिर से मैं पूछना चाहूँगा कि अप्रोच हमारी क्या मेंस में जो हम अप्रोच लेकर चल रहे थे और जो हम इंटरव्यू में अप्रोच या पीटी में अप्रोच लेकर चल रहे हैं उसमें कोई डिफरेंस आएगा? किस तरह की अप्रोच से हमें उन सिचुएशंस को टैकल करना चाहिए?
देखिए, अप्रोच जो आप रिटन पेपर में लिख के आए हैं एथिक्स के, उसी केस स्टडी पे अप्रोच एग्जैक्टली वही रहेगी। मेरा कहने का तात्पर्य यह है कि आपको पॉजिटिव होना पड़ेगा, आपको प्रैक्टिकल होना पड़ेगा। आपको, जो हम आइडियलिस्ट कई बार कहते हैं कि हम ऐसी चीज सजेस्ट कर दें जो ना मैं करूंगा ना जो कोई और करता होगा, और सिर्फ अच्छा लगने के लिए कह दें, मेरे विचार से उचित नहीं है। यू कैन बी आइडियलिस्ट येट बी प्रैक्टिकल, बट धरातल पर अपने पैर अवश्य रखने होंगे। कोई भी स्थिति हो, आपको उसको प्रैक्टिकल सोल्यूशन आपको सोचना पड़ेगा। आई थिंक दैट विल बी अप्रिशिएटेड मच मोर देन सेइंग कि ये होना चाहिए, जो किसी ने नहीं किया। तो मेरे विचार से एथिक्स में भी आई हैव ऑलवेज फेल्ट that ethical behavior pays. So ethical conduct is practical. So if people say that it is only an ideal, I would disagree with that. A purely ideal conduct may be in the realm of discussion and books, but you have to be practically ideal. And if you give examples, I'll explain this to you how it can be done. You have to be realistic. You have to, but don't do anything wrong. You can do the right, yet be practical. Normally it is associated, anything right and anything good is ideal. No, it can be practical also. So you have to match the two, the practical part of it and the right part of it. Both have to match. And I've yet to come across a situation where it is impossible to match. It may be difficult to match, but it is not impossible to match. You can do that.
ग्रेट सर। सर एक अगर मैं इफ़ यू अलाउ एक क्वेश्चन मैं आपसे
जी।
प्रैक्टिकल पूछना
जी।
चाहूँगा कि मान लीजिए आप एक सर्विस में एक ऑफिसर हैं, आपका जो जूनियर है वो आपको इनसबॉर्डिनेशन कर रहा है, आपको बाईपास करके आपके सीनियर के पास जाके बातचीत करता है, आपका वो जो सीनियर है वो भी कहीं ना कहीं उनकी सुनते हैं। सो ऐसी सिचुएशन में सर, इस बार ये केस स्टडी भी रही, तो ऐसी सिचुएशन में क्या अप्रोच रहने चाहिए अगर आपसे ये पूछा जाए?
देखिए, इसका मैं आरंभ करता हूँ। एक राइनल्ड नाइबोर करके अमेरिकन मंक है, उन्होंने कहा था, लॉर्ड ग्रांट मी द सेरेनिटी टू एक्सेप्ट थिंग्स आई कैन नॉट चेंज, courage to change things that I can, and the wisdom to understand the difference between the two. So let us try in this situation, what I can, and ask the Almighty to give me that courage. I was faced with a similar situation early in my career when I was subdivision magistrate in district Hardoi. I had just joined, this was month of, I think October. I had joined in September and I was to get married in December. And in the month of October, there was some ceremony to be held. And I went to my district magistrate and asked him for 2 days casual leave, which for some reason he denied. Very fine person, but he denied. So I said, okay, I wrote to my home that I cannot come. The ceremony may be postponed. Next day, I get to know that he sanctioned my leave. So I went to I tried to find out. So I was informed that my subordinate, a tehsildar, he had gone and met the DM and done sifarish on my behalf to sanction me leave. And he sanctioned my leave. I was very upset. I didn't go on leave. I didn't take that leave. And went and explained to the district magistrate, sir, it is not in the fitness of things that when I come to you, say no to me, and my subordinate comes and tells you and you sanction that leave, sir. Nothing against you, but sir, I don't think this is the right way of going about it, and I'm not going on leave. Now, here, it could have gone totally awry. My district magistrate could have totally misunderstood me, but so be it. You have when you make a choice, when I write in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, when you have a choice, there is a price to be paid either way. Here I was prepared to pay the price of not going home for a personal ceremony, but I knew this would help me in the near future or in the late future as well. It helped me throughout my career. My bosses would not take me for granted. So it's a choice that I'm not saying what I did was right. Someone else would have gone on leave and been happy with it. The message was also clear to my subordinate that please, for heaven's sake, don't do sifarish on my behalf. So these messages do a lot, and it totally depends on your own conduct. As I said, there's a price to be paid either way. An officer has to take a call on that front. And as I also said, I don't say what I did was right or wrong. I did what I thought was right. And that's a choice that every officer has to make. So there would be situations where a subordinate reports directly to your boss. Lord grant me the serenity to accept it. if I can't change it. Or if I were in that place, if it was not happening, I would seek a transfer and go somewhere else. Again, it's a personal choice. I'm not saying what is right, what is wrong. It's a personal choice. What I would do is first talk to the subordinate, tell him that, why are you doing this? It doesn't help you, it doesn't help me. Maybe he'll listen to me, maybe he'll not listen to me. If he listens to me, the matter ends. If he doesn't listen to me, the next step would be to go to my boss and tell him, Sir, this is the hierarchy and it affects my functioning. If he listens to it, my job is done. If he doesn't listen to it, then I have two options, either to continue and suffer that relationship or shift out of it. I would shift out of it. Again, these are choices that you have to make. Everyone makes those choices. You have to pay a price for it. If you're prepared for it, pay that price and live with it.
In many cases we have seen कि जो IAS officers बिल्कुल honest होते हैं, उनको बार बार ट्रांसफ़र भी किया जाता है एंड कहीं ना कहीं मीडिया इस बात को ग्लोरीफाई भी करता है कि ऑनेस्ट ट्रांसफ़र। क्या ये एक सही अप्रोच है या फिर जैसे कि आपने कहा कि हमें प्रैग्मेटिक होना चाहिएगा, वो बैलेंस कहाँ पर मेंटेन करें?
देखिए, अपने करियर में मैंने चीज़ को समझा ओवर ए पीरियड ऑफ टाइम और मैंने पाया कि हम में से कई अधिकारी कॉम्प्रोमाइज और एकोमोडेशन में फ़र्क नहीं समझते। वो समझते हैं कि कोई भी नेता जो बात कह रहा है या कोई अन्य व्यक्ति बात कह रहा है, वो हमसे गलत बात कर रहा है, मैं ही सिर्फ। ये हमें कई लोगों में समस्या होती है, स्पेशली जो ऑनेस्ट होते हैं उनमें कई लोगों में समस्या है कि वो समझते हैं मैं ही ऑनेस्ट हूं और दुनिया बेईमान है, मैं ही सही कह रहा हूं, सब गड़बड़ कर रहे हैं। सबसे गड़बड़ी यहां से शुरू होती है। खुद ऑनेस्ट तो होना ही चाहिए आदमी को, लेकिन ये मानना कि बाकी सब बेईमान है, ये भी गलत है। दुनिया में, देश में, अपने जनपद में बहुत ऑनेस्ट लोग हैं और पूरी ऑनेस्टी का जामा हमने तो पहन नहीं रखा है। सो दैट इज फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम। Many such officers don't introspect and see, what can I do? Why am I getting transferred so frequently? Is there something wrong with me also, or is the system totally wrong? The easiest thing is to blame the system, blame everyone else and become a hero, become the fall guy. You appear as the tragic hero that every time you are being brushed. I think that's the wrong way of going about it. What really needs to be done is to introspect and see, is there anything wrong with me? See, I have written in my book, honesty alone is not enough. Honesty is a necessary condition, but not sufficient condition for a good officer. An officer has to be efficient. There is no denying the fact that he has to be honest. Honesty alone is not enough. He has to deliver. We are paid salary to do things on the ground, to deliver things on the ground. So, for example, one neta or politician or somebody else is asking me to do something which is wrong. I would obviously not do it. But that doesn't mean that whatever he is telling me is wrong. The problem arises when we become prejudiced against those that are coming to us for asking us for some favor. Now that favor may fall in a gray area, which may not be against the law or against the rules, but can be done. So I'll give you a concrete example. Early in my career, when I was additional registrar banking in cooperative society, there was a request that came to me from a husband, wife, a couple who were serving, to post them to a same place. Okay. Now, rule was silent on it. Now, totally honest and only honest officer would say, no, they should serve separately. But I was sympathetic to them. I said, yes, if they live separately, probably the performance will suffer. One will keep going to the other place. I looked at it practically. So I came out with a provision that if wherever possible, we should adjust husband and wife in the same position. Not only that couple benefited, but other future couple also benefited. Now, a purely honest officer will say, "Ya aapne kya kiya?" I have discovered in my career, there are huge amount of gray area. The question is, in that gray area, can I have a positive outlook? And its impact will be great. If you say yes in 90% cases, then those 10% no will not be held against you. But if you said 90% no, then you are in trouble. And then you can remain honest and say, why can't we start with yes? Yes to something which is not illegal. I'm clarifying again, anything against the law should not be done. Or if it has to be done, the law should be changed, rules should be changed, then only it should be done. But if someone could be helped, why shouldn't we help? And that's again a positive attitude. We should try and help people. I'm there to help people. Now, if a neta comes to me, I will say, why should I? He's corrupt. Our assumption is wrong. Secondly, when I talk about compromise and accommodation, never ever compromise as far as the law is concerned. Okay. But you have to accommodate people if law is not getting violated. What the example that I gave of husband and wife is accommodating them. It's not a compromise. So some of us honest officers think that every accommodation is a compromise. And that's where the problem is. And the biggest problem is many of us who are honest feel that the rest of the world is dishonest. The world is crashing. If I don't carry that banner of honesty, I think every dishonest person will thrive. I think that's wrong way of going about it.
All right. So what we are saying is that we need to understand that honesty is a means to an end, not an end in itself.
No, honesty can be. Honesty can be an end in itself, but it is not the end.
The end.
Honesty can, whatever I'm doing honestly and for honest purposes. But it doesn't end with honesty. I have to deliver things on the ground. Take, for example, there's an officer who's honest, doesn't do anything. He's honest. He doesn't do anything and there's no dishonesty in it. But you have to do things. You can't sit tight and say, interpret the rule in a manner that nothing goes wrong. Obviously, nothing should go wrong. But then you are given the task of delivering things on the ground. And mind you, from my personal experience, I can tell you, enormous amount of gray area where you can interpret things for the benefit of the people. I have given an example in my book on how I reinterpreted the law to benefit the brick kiln workers. ईंट भट्टे के बच्चे. इशू ये था कि उनको बिल्डिंग एंड कंस्ट्रक्शन वर्कर का लाभ दिया जाए ना दिया जाए. Now, strictly speaking, they were not building construction workers. They were preparing something, the bricks, to be used. तो उसमें काउंटर लॉजिक किसी ने दी. इसमें स्टील मेकर जो है उसके भी काम करने वाले कहेंगे हमारा स्टील भी तो बिल्डिंग में इस्तेमाल होता है. Then I gave a logic. I said the value add by these poor people on that brick is much more than the steel worker there. The value add, वहां तो मड से ब्रिक बनाता है तो value add is many percentages higher than that. And they got benefit. आज तक तो किसी CBI ED ने दरवाजा नहीं खटखटाया, आगे का पता नहीं.
नहीं, that is great, sir. So we have to be pragmatic along with the honesty, right? So that is there. So sir, आज का जो ये इंटरव्यू रहा इसमें लगभग हमने सभी मुद्दे कवर करने की कोशिश की एंड आपने बहुत ही खूबसूरती से सभी मुद्दों पर प्रकाश डाला. मुझे उम्मीद है कि सर ये वाला जो आज का हमारा सेशन है ये बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स को ना केवल इस बार के बट आने वाले वर्षों में भी मदद करने वाला है. आप इस सेशन में हमारे साथ जुड़े सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
एक चीज बताना चाहूंगा कि क्योंकि ये स्टडी IQ का प्लेटफॉर्म है, यहाँ पे आने कुछ दिनों बाद रिटन रिजल्ट आने वाला है UPSC का. रिटन रिजल्ट आने के बाद हम लोग निःशुल्क उन लोगों को गाइड करेंगे जो कि पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट के लिए क्वालिफाई करेंगे. इसका एक लिंक भी उपलब्ध है स्टडी IQ पर. मैं चाहूँगा कि जितने लोग मेंस में क्वालिफाई करके पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट में जाते हैं वो अपना फॉर्म इसमें भरें. उनसे ना केवल हम जनरल चर्चा करेंगे कि पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट में क्या करें, हमने ये भी व्यवस्था बनाई है कि उनसे 1-to-1 भी हम उनसे चर्चा करके उनको गाइड कर सकें कि उनसे कौन से संभावित प्रश्न हैं जो पूछे जाएंगे. So they can benefit from this association. I would appeal to all those that qualify for the personality test to apply in that absolutely free.
Thank you sir. एंड जैसा कि आप लोगों ने देखा दोस्तों कि आने वाले वो सभी स्टूडेंट्स जो कि इस इंटरव्यू में या पर्सनैलिटी टेस्ट में अपीयर होने जा रहे हैं वो स्टडी IQ के इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे सर की गाइडेंस का एंड और कई सारे ऑफिसर्स की गाइडेंस का फ़ायदा उठा सकते हैं. थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर जॉइनिंग अस सर. थैंक यू ऑल फॉर वॉचिंग दिस शो. थैंक यू.
थैंक यू.
स्टडी IQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल.